Man, one of the true joys of this job is just being able to connect with artists and surfers whose work I've admired for years, sometimes decades. I had seen photos of today's guests getting absolutely kegged on the North Shore. Then I saw his name credited as a photographer and then eventually as a writer. All the while, my admiration grew. And all of this was actually a precursor to my viewing of the 2010 documentary film 180 Degrees South, wherein Jeff was a main character, and where I finally felt like I actually got to know the man behind the imagery and those written words. Chris Malloy directed the film, which we actually discuss a bit on this show. But if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend checking it out. 180 Degrees South. The synopsis reads, quote, "The film follows adventurer Jeff Johnson as he retraces the epic 1968 journey of his heroes, Yvon Chouinard and Doug Tompkins, to Patagonia," end quote. Referring to Jeff as an adventurer is actually perfect. He's a great surfer. He's a very respected climber. He was a North Shore Lifeguard. He actually graced the cover of Outside Magazine. But all of these things started because he was a ne'er-do-well skateboard kid rebelling against the establishment in suburban Northern California. And that was something that I actually really wanted to hear more about from him directly. He documents some of that youth in this criminally underpriced coffee table book called Way High Kick Turn. The foreword is actually written by Christy Turlington, whom actually grew up near Jeff at the same time. It is epic. I will actually link to Way High Kick Turn on surfsplendorpodcast.com if you want to grab a copy for yourself. And as you could probably tell from this intro, Jeff has lived a few different lives. He is still going on epic adventures, creating more. So lots to discuss here today. It was actually a 3-hour conversation, so I cut it into 2 parts. I'm going to drop part 2 tomorrow. We recorded the episode in Jeff's incredibly designed home in Santa Barbara, California in May 2023, almost exactly 3 years ago today. And that home was actually featured in the Indoic Surf Shacks Volume 2 right here. We actually recorded the episode in his kitchen. And this book, here's his kitchen right here. This book is part of Matt Titone's series, Surf Shacks, and he was episode number 593. If you want to go back and listen to that from a couple of weeks ago. All of this, of course, is made possible with support from the Surfrider Foundation, Real Water Sports, and Veyer Watches. The ocean needs more friends, so please consider becoming a member at surfrider.org. Their work is only limited by the number of people and resources available, so supporting their pursuit for a healthier ocean is a noble cause, and there's plenty more work to be done. Go to surfrider.org. RealWatersports.com boasts a 1,500 surfboard inventory. They have a YouTube channel that actually does excellent surfboard review videos. Check that out. They have anything you need for any water sport, and they ship boards worldwide for one low flat fee. RealWatersports.com. Then, of course, Veyer Watches, VeyerWatches.com/surfsplendor will save you 15% on an American-assembled, waterproof guaranteed timepiece made by surfers for adventure. Veyer is spelled V-A-E-R, and that's VeyerWatches.com/surfsplendor. Give them a follow also on Instagram if you don't already, just to kind of get constant eye candy to gawk at. Really beautiful stuff. All right, my name is David Scales for Surf Splendor, and without further ado, I really hope you enjoy part 1 of my conversation with Jeff Johnson.
Surf Splendor.
It's ridiculous.
It's crazy. I'm going to double check to make sure that I pushed record on everything.
Yeah.
I need a roadie.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, like, I'm going to forget to push record at some point or something super basic.
Oh, dude, yeah. No, I mean, it's, you know, with the work I do with photography and stuff, like, sometimes just having an assistant just hand you a lens. Like, it's just like, so you don't have to get up.
Yeah.
And get, interrupted with your thing. It's just...
My primary focus should be having a conversation.
Yeah.
And so it really pulls you out to then adjust cameras.
And same thing when I don't have an assistant, I'm like shooting, I'm like, hold on a second.
Exactly.
And it just it fucks up the whole rhythm of things. So.
One day I'll get there.
Yeah, you will.
Maybe on year 20.
Yeah.
Let's enter the conversation. I want to ask you what you did for your 50th birthday.
For my 50th.
I know it was a few years ago now.
Yeah.
But I thought it was compelling.
Yeah, I'm 54 now. So yeah, that was 4 years ago. So actually a couple things. I think I turned 50 on a family trip to Europe. So pretty sure we're in Paris. And so we just went out and it was my daughter, who was maybe 3 at the time, and then my wife and I, and we just had a little dinner in Paris, which is really nice. And but then when I came back right after that trip, I wanted to celebrate my birthday doing this thing where a lot of climbers do this thing where they try to do, like out in Joshua Tree, it's really popular. They try to climb 50 pitches on their birthday. And a pitch is just a rope length, 100 feet or whatever. So, but it's a really daunting task to try to, especially in Joshua Tree, you have to run around all these different places and try to do it. And so I wanted to do it in Yosemite, so I linked a bunch of stuff up in Yosemite, and I wanted to climb 50 pitches in a day and then also run 50K a couple days later or whatever. And so the 50 pitches, I missed it just by 6 pitches.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. We kind of climbed out of Yosemite Valley up into Tuolumne, linked a bunch of climbs, and then we were up in this place called Cathedral Peak, which is about 11,000 feet. And it's the climb itself is maybe 6 pitches of climbing, and that would have finished the whole thing. And we got up there, and it was dark and cold and windy, and we could have done it, but it's like, what? Who cares? I mean,
right.
I didn't pull it, And then the 50K thing was, I've gotten into running the last maybe 6 or 8 years, and I always wanted to run parts of the John Muir Trail.
Oh yeah.
Because there's people that run the whole thing, try to beat times, all these extreme kind of runners, and I just wanted to do little chunks, and so we ran from Mammoth to Tuolumne Meadows, which is 50K. I think it's like 34 miles or something like that, and so that was kind of in celebration of my 50th there, trying to pull a couple things off.
So you did complete that one?
Yeah.
In one day.
Yeah.
Why'd you get into running?
I started shooting some of these endurance, these long distance runners when I was working for Patagonia. I'd go out and shoot these runners, and I was kind of like, running could be for photos. It's a lot of work and pretty fun, but like I was like, just not super fired up, I was more into shooting, surfing, and climbing and stuff like that. And I shot this guy and this girl running across Zion National Park, and they have this thing where it's called fastest known time, the FKT, FKTs. And so they have this little thing where they try to beat everybody's time. It's like this little underground thing. There's a website for it and stuff. So you might look up at an area and, what's the fastest known time at that time? That place, I'm going to try to beat it. So they went and I think they ran, it was like 48 miles in a day, and we documented it. We shot video and shot some photos and stuff. And I was blown away how they saw the whole park in a matter of hours. Like they covered so much ground, more ground than anybody would cover. And most people that would take like 3 days or 4 days of hiking. And their scene was so cool. The running scene is kind of, it's kind of an underground scene, and the people are really hardcore, and there's no money in it. And it kind of reminded me of the skaters and the skating that I grew up with in the 80s, because when I was in the prime of my skating was pretty underground. There's not a lot to it. And I just saw kind of that special thing in these runners. Like they were just doing it to one-up each other, no money, very little fame, and they're doing some of the gnarliest things. They're running, some of them are running literally hundreds of miles, So I was really blown away by it. And so I started getting interested in that. And I like to climb. I got into climbing later in life. So trying to stay fit in Santa Barbara here or Ventura, where there's not a lot of climbing, it's like, can't surf all the time, not a lot of surf. So I just wanted a way to keep just my general fitness up.
Yeah.
So I read that book, Born to Run. Mm-hmm. Have you heard of that book?
Yeah.
I started reading it, and I'm like, this is a book on running. It's got to be the most boring book ever. And it was a total page turner, And the premise to that book is how he changed his running. He was injured, and he the doctor told him he couldn't run. He's got to stop running. He's like, oh, that's bullshit. So he started kind of looking into all this barefoot running stuff, you know, and he changed the way he ran and just started running more on the balls of his feet instead of the heels, and he was back to running hundreds of miles again.
Wow.
And so he wrote a book on it, and that's what really grabbed me, because I couldn't. When I moved over here from Hawaii, I was always running the soft sand on the North Shore, which is like running in snow, and it's really easy on your body. And when I started running here, I couldn't run over, half an hour without my shins and knees going out. So I drank the Kool-Aid, read that book, and I just started running on the balls of my feet and training myself. You have to totally retrain yourself on how to run, because you've been told you got to run heel toe your whole life. And so and then I just started running, and now it's like something that I do. I don't love it as much as some of these runners that I hang out with, like they just love it.
Yeah.
But it has its moments, and it's fun. It's cool. It's, you can, I go up to Yosemite. I was just up there on a job, and I just ran the Yosemite Falls Trail and back and stuff. And
do you do barefoot?
No, but it's like barefoot inspired.
Gotcha.
I did try at first. I just went to these real grassy football fields and just ran barefoot on the. I watched the videos and everything and read how you're supposed to strike on the forefoot, and so I tried that a little bit, but I don't need to be running around barefoot, so I was just using these real minimal shoes. The whole point is that you feel the trail, and since you're not running so hard, it's like it's more of a light run, because you're on your forefoot, and your foot is designed, it's this beautiful shock absorber that's designed to run on your toes. When you're running on your heels, it's just going boom right up to your back. It's just, there's no shock there. So the shoes are designed without, they have a drop, a lot of them. So they don't have a heel, they're flat, and they're very, very little sole there, so you can feel the trail, but you don't really need a lot of padding because you're on your toes. And so, it's just a totally different way of doing it. And I run in shoes, but they're all kind of minimal, and they're zero drop shoes and all that techie stuff. But
you haven't mentioned any of like the therapeutic aspects of it at all. Is that part of it for you as well?
Yeah, it's when I said I don't love it, I do love it, but I'm not like, I have runner friends that are just, they're just dreaming about runs, and they just can't stop running, whereas I'm not that fanatic, but I do love the benefits from it. I get really clear-headed. I just, even before this interview, I should have went for a run, because it just it calms you down.
Right.
It's good to do if you have like a heavy workload that day and a lot of shit going on. You go for a run, it just kind of calms your whole system down and makes me a lot more clear-headed. And
that's that's a thing. As you get older, or you move away from the beach or whatever, surfing provided all of that for all of us at a certain point, and maybe for decades even.
Yeah.
But as your life changes, you need other things that you can kind of fill that space with.
For sure.
And running is one that it's just so convenient.
It's so convenient. It's so easy.
Yeah. It's you don't need a ton of time. You don't have to get changed into your wetsuit and out and all that kind of stuff. Or if you're a cyclist, it takes a ton of time to get dressed for it, and you need 4 hours to really get the workout. You know,
$3,000 bike.
Yeah, exactly.
Or something. And that's the running part. I'm kind of a minimalist, so I just love the simplicity. You just have a pair of shoes. Like, I even got to a point where I just love the whole minimalist approach, but I was like not even wearing socks, and I just wear shoes and shorts, no shirt, no hat if I'm running like it in the morning or at night. And I'm like, this is so cool. I have nothing. Yeah. I'm just like shorts and shoes. There's something really pure about that.
It's so much easier when you have this environment. By the way, when you if you're living in a concrete jungle or suburbia and you're just walking or running on gridded streets, quarter mile that way, left, quarter mile that way, it gets boring.
Well, I can't do that. I'll run sometimes where there's street involved, but it hurts too. It's more jarring, and it's just not, I'm lucky where I live right here. Part of the draw of moving up here was having trails. I have trails all around my house, and some I've made myself. And so I can just bail here and I run for an hour or two and then come back, and, But yeah, I mean, nothing takes the place of surfing, obviously. You know, it's not like, oh my God, you should have seen this run. I came around this corner and it was just amazing. You know, surfing, it's obviously a better thing, you know, more interesting thing to do. But it's hard to surf all the time, and especially when you're busy and older and
I like to think that surfing is unique in that way because that's what I know.
Yeah.
And it is like you're enveloped in Mother Nature, and there's all these kind of things that I could argue would make it unique.
Yeah.
But the only thing that I've ever heard anybody talk about that represents that same connection is climbing. Mm. And so I don't know that to be true because I don't climb, but I was actually going to ask you about that.
Yeah. It's no, it's interesting. I think about it all the time because I do both. That's right. Two of my main things that I love to do, and climbing is equally important as surfing is to me in my life. But yeah, it's funny. You can't really compare the acts because it's so different. And I do go out on a limb with surfing as saying it is one of the most unique things you can do in this world. I really believe it is. Like there's nothing like that at all. And climbing's the action of it is not at all, but it's the same. Whereas surfing, you learn to kind of adapt to your surroundings and learn to work with your surroundings, you know, like and these are all things that you don't really notice until you think about it. But, you know, you jumped in that current, the current takes you out to the peak. To get in, if the current in the channel is too strong, you just take waves in. Like you're not conquering the surroundings, you're working with it. So, and you're becoming more harmonious, I guess, with your surroundings. So climbing's kind of the same thing. Like a lot of rock climbers will disagree with that old mountaineering thing. Like we conquered the mountain. It's like, no, you met the mountain on its terms and you rose with it and you summited because you met it on its own terms. And that to me is similar to surfing. It's like you have to be humble. You have to be able to make mistakes and learn from those. And in that way, it's really similar. Yeah. You're never conquering it. And you never, like surfing, I mean, I'm sure Kelly is still figuring stuff out. Like you never get it dialed, you know. And climbing, there's always going to be something harder. There's always going to be somebody better. It's a real humbling thing, you know, and you fail a lot. Right. And you talk about climbers failing and how those are some of their most kind of impactful climbs are the ones, not the ones where they made it. It's the ones that they failed on. And that's how you get better. That's how you grow and all that. So yeah, it's real similar. And the people, the characters are real similar. Like I got into climbing late in life. I was always interested in it as a kid. I grew up in Northern California and going to Yosemite with my parents and stuff. And so I knew about climbing and I was always really interested in it and kind of read about it. But I moved to the North Shore when I was like 18 or something. I just didn't get into climbing until I was like early 30s, 31 or something. And yeah, it was the characters right away. I'm like, oh my God, that, you know, to me they're the same, right? The Yosemite Valley is just like the North Shore of Oahu. Right. It's where it's the proving grounds. It's where everybody goes every year. And I was like, oh, that's the same character. I mean, they're like, they're perfect fits, you know. That guy, you could just put him on the North Shore and he'd be the same dude, you know. And because you got these, you know, these real eccentric guys, you got the macho guys, you got the, you know, type A guys, you know, you just have all these different people, and there's a lot of character in that, you know. And I don't know, that was my attraction right away. And again, it was kind of like the time that I got into climbing was around early 2000s, and it's changed a little bit. But surfing, I came from the North Shore, where it's the epicenter. Surfing, it's kind of a scene, and I was blown away by the climbers because they were just so underground. You know, kind of reminded me, like I said again, like the skaters I grew up with in the early 80s. There just wasn't money in it. It was like so underground, and these climbers were doing some of the most audacious shit in the world, and with very little fanfare. You know, right. Some of the best climbers in the world don't even have places to sleep in the valley. They're still sleeping in their vans outside the valley. You know,
I've seen that.
And they're like the number one climbers. And,
right.
So I just love the humility of that, and And it's still there in surfing, but I was in the thick of it in Hawaii, where it's just such a scene. I was coming to, Yosemite Valley and seeing the same thing, but it's just so much more underground and low key,
In the early 2000s on the North Shore, there's millionaire surfers that are 18 years old, so at that point it had already exploded.
Yeah.
So let's go back then. Danville, California, you grew up playing ball sports, and you got a skateboard at some point, and that changed everything, right?
Yeah.
What was the introduction? What was the year? Who got you the skateboard? And what was the...
there's a lot going on there, because I actually remember the day where my life changed, and I think that's kind of funny that I know the day that it changed. But I played soccer, baseball, football, played all that, and I think how did it go down? So one of the biggest inspirations to me was a guy that lived in my neighborhood that had motorcycles and skateboards and surfboards. His name's Jimmy Olsen. And so Danville, you got to understand, there's probably, the way surfing is now, it's like, what is it, an hour and a half, 2 hours away from Santa Cruz. It's 45 minutes to an hour away from Ocean Beach, maybe even longer. It's a landlocked town. And in the 70s and 80s, when I grew up there was, Jimmy Olsen was like the one surfer from there. I'm sure there's surfers now,
Yeah.
But he was like the one guy. And he lived on my street. And he was the atypical cool California kid, long blonde hair. He raced like XR 75s and 125s. He had motorcycles. He had Toyota Tonka trucks, with the big tires, and he surfed. And he was like the epitome of cool, And I was like 4 or 5 years younger than him, watching him and just obsessed with what he's doing. But I was playing like baseball and all this stuff. And so he's the one that got me kind of into skateboarding and surfing, and huge inspiration. But it wasn't till I couldn't really surf till I started driving.
Of course, yeah.
So, but he was there. So he was somebody that I really looked up to, and I don't know what it is, but I had this real thing about individuals at a young age, and I don't know if it's my dad or my mom, but because they always told me not to follow people, just be your own person, and blah blah blah. And I had this admiration of the individual, the person that can stand on its own, and I kind of saw that in like Jimmy Olsen, like he's doing these things that he's just one person. He's not on a team. He's riding motorcycles. He's skateboarding. He's surfing, and I thought that was really unique. And then this is kind of you can edit this, right? It's just a long story, but
yeah, or not.
But
I can leave it in.
Yeah, it's like my life changed. Like I remember I was kind of into. So this is probably late 70s. Vans were starting to become a thing a little bit, but they weren't really a thing in Danville. It's landlocked town, and I somehow got onto Vans. I just loved Vans, and this kid moved to Washington. This kid moved to Danville from Washington, and we became friends. He's on the football team, on my football team, and he goes, "Hey, I want to get some new clothes, and some shoes. My mom gave me money for shoes, and it's so different back then. Like a kid from Washington dresses so different from a kid from Danville, California. Now it's kind of all similar, but he kind of wanted to fit in, right? So he picked the wrong guy to go shopping with. But I went downtown with him, and we went to the store, and it was the first time I saw checkerboards on the sole. And I was like, holy shit, man, this is the coolest thing ever. If I had money, I would buy these. Like, I'm so jealous, but this is the shit. This is what you need to get. And he's like, really? So he bought these Vans. And I never saw him wear them, right? And he bought those Vans, whatever. And then we had our last football game of the year, and I had ordered, my mom was really into helping me. You could order Vans back then, any color you wanted, So my mom was like, she'd help me get on, it's not even a website, but I don't even know how we'd figure it out. You fill out a form.
Sure.
And they just started making checkerboard on the fabric. And I saw it in the catalog or whatever. That is so cool. You can get checkerboard. So I ordered these special order Vans, that actually had checkerboard,
Yeah.
that you see everywhere.
Yeah.
And so I was really excited about these shoes, and we had our football game, and I remember coming out of the locker, we all took showers and stuff, and I'm putting on my new Vans. I'm so stoked, And I walk out of the locker room, and all the cool guys in the football team were lined up, and they're all laughing at me and making fun of my shoes and like pointing at me and stuff. And I was looking at them, I was like, fuck, like, and I just wanted to walk away. You're getting made fun of by the whole team, And all I could do is look at this guy that has a pair of checkerboard Vans in his closet, and I'm like, motherfucker, like, you didn't even have the balls to wear that. And I suddenly got a chip on my shoulder. I'm like, none of you guys can stand on your own. You're all part of a crew. You all lean on each other for something, and like, none of you are individuals. None of you can stand on your own. Fuck you guys.
Interesting.
And
because it could have broken you, rather than fortify you.
Yeah, I was being made. It was one of those things. I'm like, I wanted to bail. Like, when you're 12 years old and the whole football team's making fun of you, I was just like, I didn't want to be there, but I was like, you know what? Fuck you guys. And that changed everything. I got a skateboard. I already kind of dabbled in skateboarding, but I think through Jimmy, that guy on my street, got a skateboard, started listening to punk rock, cut my hair, and that was it. Quit all quit all the ball sports.
Yeah.
And, it was a full rebellion. Instantly I was at odds with parents, teachers. I'd wear shirts that say jock on them and with a big cross through it, and I'd get beat up by jocks, skating around town, and carload of jocks would pull up and beat me up and stuff. But you're asking for it, it's just like that age. And so that really, I look back on that now more than ever. I realized that was a real turning point in my life of where I was going to go with everything, like what I valued in people and what I valued as far as something to do with myself. I just didn't find anything attractive about ball sports after that, and of course there's nothing wrong with those sports, but and that just sent me on this whole trajectory where my life just took a turn right there, and it's probably the biggest turning point in my life, I think, was that.
So I could see your parents encouraging you to be an individual and to carve your own path. But
kind of backfired right there.
Yeah, the path that you decided to take.
Yeah.
Were they apprehensive about it, or were they?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
You got kicked out of school too, right?
Yeah, in high school. Yeah, I can kind of kicked out. Yeah, kicked out basically. But yeah, my parents weren't stoked, right? Like, they knew that being in sports will keep you out of trouble, and now I'm not in sports and I'm not doing well in school. I'm riding skateboards. They don't know what I'm doing. And that was the whole attraction with my friends. We all kind of met each other. Like, all of us had issues or whatever we had going on, and we all kind of found each other, and skateboarding was that glue that held us together, and we were like a tight crew. And the whole thing about it that we loved, and I didn't know it then, but now looking back, is like, we love the fact that people didn't know what we were doing. Like, our peers at school didn't know what skateboarding was. Our parents are like, what do you guys do? You just disappear what is that? And that was the whole cool thing about it. And it was every time you left the house, it was just this blank canvas that you can just go do stuff. There weren't coaches telling you what to do. You're just kind of riffing off each other. You're trying to one up each other. There's like a healthy amount of competition, but it's all down to you. And it was super exciting time. And we were, we were doing things we weren't supposed to be doing. We were really interested in getting outside of our little suburban bubble there in Danville. And we started, thumbing rides or riding the BART bus to other towns, and our parents had no idea what we were doing. We were going into Berkeley, San Francisco at age 13, and cruising around the streets and getting into trouble, and I just remember coming back to school on a Monday and thinking like, what did you guys do this weekend? Like, cause like I saw some heavy shit out in San Francisco, and
for sure,
and the cool thing about it, the interesting thing about it is by the time we had our driver's license, we already had a network of friends throughout the entire Bay Area. And, obviously before social media or anything, like just telephones, I don't know how we did it all, but, we're skating pools, and, that was in the early 80s when skateboarding was just done. There were, it was a point where all the magazines went under. A lot of the hard good companies were gone. The skate parks were all closed. So we were, it was drainage ditches, backyard pools. It was the street, building your own ramps. It was a full-on little Wild West time of skating. And, we had, by the time we were 16, we had this network of all these friends. We already knew everybody all over the Bay Area. It was like this crazy, group of kids that we were kind of involved with all over. And I think that really set the tone of just things, for the rest of my life, at least, of just traveling. And that was like my first taste of real adventure. Like, right. Getting on that bus and going into San Francisco when you're 13 years old was like a huge deal, and there's a lot it was my poor parents, there's a lot of drugs back then and still is, but we were smoking weed and doing all this stuff and
stealing lumber.
We got, we got busted for that finally. I got busted with like 300 sheets of plywood in my truck, my dad's truck. And he was a general contractor, which is even worse. And I was on probation for weed at the time. And we all got thrown in, like, it was classic. Like, we all got thrown in separate jail cells and stuff. And they called our parents. And we were building this huge ramp on a friend's tennis court. It was a big vert ramp, took up the whole tennis court. And we're all lying like, hey, his family's like, where is this wood coming from? They're like, saying my dad donated it. And I'm saying, Georgie Furtado's dad donated it. And like, but we would just go out on weekends stealing wood. Like we would go to a party, and then after the party break up, we'd jump in my truck and just go to lumber sites, construction sites, and just load up. And that's how we built it,
I've seen images of that ramp. It's insane.
In the skateboard book or in the?
I think it was in that. You were giving a talk somewhere on YouTube, like a presentation, looked like a TED talk almost.
Oh yeah.
And you had images of all that stuff.
Yeah.
Because in the earlier images of the ramps that you had built were scary looking. I mean, super sketchy.
So sketchy, yeah.
So sketchy.
You're just like you're finding shit in the yard and you're just nailing it up, and you might find this, might find whatever, and you just make these things that are just death traps, yeah.
And then as it progresses and you have that huge half pipe on the tennis courts, it looks professionally built.
Yeah, and I look back on it, and of course it's me and my friends that I'm all excited about, but like I look at it and I go, I can't believe a bunch of 16-year-olds built that.
I can't either.
It's a huge, it wasn't just us. There were pockets of us, kids just like us, all over the United States at the time. It was still a small scene, but there's like kids like us in Texas and in San Diego and all over the place. And we figured out how to build these things, and they look like I'm like, how did a bunch of 16-year-olds build this? And they're done really well and huge, right? Like
totally.
Taking up an entire tennis court. And I don't even know of the rough costs of that because we stole all of it. It must be 20, 30 grand in just wood, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if you think about the layers, back then you had to do 3 layers of 3/8, and it was 32 sheets per layer, right? So that's like 100 sheets of plywood right there. And then you have to layer it masonite. And what was a piece of plywood is $10 back then. Just in plywood, you're looking at thousands of dollars just for the plywood. I mean, incredible. So yeah. Anyways, we got busted, and finally the parents got in. What is going on here? Then they realized, oh my God, all the parents got together, and they're like, these kids have been stealing all this wood. And so they finally helped out with the last couple layers and stuff. And
most parents would have demoed that, man.
Oh, I can't believe they didn't. But I think it would be hard. Like we put all that work into it. Like it was a beautiful,
They were actually impressed by your resolve
kind of,
and your engineering.
And I think my dad was like, he was a general contractor. He's like, holy shit, these kids are doing something here. And the thing is like we didn't even think to ask, because we're all so on our own with the thing. We didn't want help, and that was half the fun, is stealing this stuff, so it wasn't an easy time for my parents and a lot of the parents around Danville at the time. It was like, kids, we were getting in a lot of trouble, and there's a dark side to some of that too. Sure. It wasn't always super fun, and definitely not for the parents. I mean, the punk scene was happening at that time, the early '80s punk scene, and I remember there was like this thing called Parents Against Punks or something. Like it was just like our parents were having meetings because we're all running away from home. We're all doing some crazy shit. And they're like, how do we just corral? What's going on with our kids? It was.
And if they listen to the music itself, they have to be horrified.
Oh,
it's such a stark contrast from Burt Bacharach or whatever they were listening
the
to.
Beatles and stuff. Yeah, it's like
Engelbert Humperdinck.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I used to lay there. I just lay there with my headphones on, going to sleep at night, listening to like Black Flag and a band called Christian Death. And just some dark shit. And I'm like, how did I fall asleep to that shit? But yeah, and there were times when my parents would hear something, or they did. I forget. We had a big falling out over something, and my mom and dad took away all my albums, all my punk rock albums. Well, every album, but it was all mostly punk rock. And then we all had tons of tapes, because I had probably 100 tapes that radio stations and other people's music. And so took all my albums, all my tapes, and it was like a big falling out. Like that didn't go well with me and or them. And I didn't get it back till I was like in my mid-20s.
Wow. I
was at my dad's office, and he goes, "Oh yeah, I have this box." And he gave me I'm like, "Oh my God," like really good albums. Like the first Minor Threat Out of Step album that I ordered off Thrasher magazine for $5. That's in there. First Black Flag, Jealous Again,
wow.
Damaged albums. Like there's some really good albums in there, but yeah, they took, they were trying to figure out what to do with me, like.
My equivalent of that was buying Sublime's first couple albums because I heard about them in Lost videos.
Oh yeah. They're so good.
In the mid 90s, Lost was using those early Sublime songs,
Yeah.
Songs that they would later re-record and put on like their big album that blew up, 40 Ounces to Freedom or whatever it was, but they had like earlier studio versions of it on the earlier albums.
You can find those. Yeah, they're just a little rougher. They're not as polished. Yeah,
and it was like, man, where can I find this music? And then you go to, the local record shop and find it and feel like you're first in on something.
Yeah, isn't that interesting how, it's just so different how you find stuff now. Like there's, I think Sean Stussy wrote this whole thing. Did he write? Yeah. This whole thing on creativity, on how, and he wasn't being bitter about, those were the days today, it sucks today, it was better then, but he was just saying how you got your inspiration, how you went down these different paths was so much more intentional, and it took so much more work. And I think that's when, back in the day, when you found somebody that was kind of into what you're doing, you saw this thing in them, you're like, whoa, I know what you had to go through to find this, and what do you got? And there's a thing there. And he was talking about, being he was a surfboard shaper to begin with, but, he's going to Japan, he's checking out the styles, he started Stussy Clothing that way. But to get there, what he went through to get there was such a big deal. You'd see this one shoe that you saw in Shibuya, Japan, and you go there and then you find a little zine from there. It's like it's like following these little treasure hunts.
Sure.
But the record stores were awesome. You'd go in there and find, flip through the record stores and find. Sometimes it'd just be the cover of the album. Like, what the fuck is this?
That was so much of those albums. The artwork,
Yeah.
I think that's missing with a lot of music nowadays. Part of the experience was just that.
The sleeve, like you're looking at the sleeve and you're. Turn on the back. I used to get into who played, sometimes another band member for somebody else would play, and you're like, oh,
So back to your storyline. I know you mentioned you moved to Hawaii when you were 18. You'd gotten kicked out of high school. Did you ever finish high school?
I did. So
okay.
When I say I got kicked out, it was I kind of call it kicked out, which I think it was. In my sophomore year in high school, I ran away from home and lived in this secret room in my friend's house for a week, and his mom didn't even, it's literally you in the hallway, you open the closet and there's clothes, and you part the clothes and there's a little door, and you open that door and you're in an attic, and I lived in that attic without his mom knowing for a week.
He's just passing you trays of food?
Oh yeah, I would sneak in there, and then they'd all go to school in the morning, and I'd wake up and just make myself a bowl of cereal and go skate. He had it's in the book, he's got he had a half pipe in his barn, so I just go skate the half pipe until everybody got out of school.
Crazy.
Like, but anyways, all fun and games for me, just horrible for my parents. But so anyways, I missed a bunch of school, and I was doing horribly in school already, and so they brought me in there with the principal. And the principal, Mr. Morrison, I just remember this guy, like he hated me. Like he just, you can tell. I mean, you don't like to think that about teachers and stuff, like, but I think he really just didn't like me. You know, I think he really wanted me out of that school. And so in the meeting, he said, look, Jeff can stay here, but he's not going to graduate on time. He'll have to repeat a year. And when you hear that as a kid, like, there's no way you're going to stay another year after. Impossible, right? And he knew that, you know. So I think, to me, I think he was like, gave us a choice that really wasn't a choice, you know. And so I was just like, forget that. And there's this continuation school over across town where all the so-called losers go to, you know. So I really wanted to go there because it was so lax. It was like babysitting, you know. All I wanted to do is just skate, you know. And so I ended up going to that school, and it was classic. Like, I could write volumes of stories on that school, but it's, you know, where pregnant women, kids have been in juvenile hall. There's like, you know, this is the 80s, so there's like stoners and punkers and metalheads, and, you know, it's like tons of riffraff there. And so I ended up going to that school, and which is basically just you're out early, like it's kind of babysitting there. And so I went there for a while, and which is great for me for a time, because all I want to do is just fuck off, basically. And then I got busted, going back to that thing, I got busted for weed when I was a kid. Like, I think it must have been that year. Yeah. End of my sophomore year. Got busted for weed, and then I got busted for that wood, stealing wood, and I got put on probation and got put on piss tests. And I found out years later, not till I was like 30 or something, my mom said, oh, they didn't even put you on. They were just going to slap your hand, and she was pissed that they were just slapping my hand. And she goes, I demanded that they put you on piss tests, but it's expensive, and they weren't. So they were fake tests.
Oh my God.
Thank God for my mom, right?
Yeah.
So, but I was so paranoid, because she's just like, you get a dirty test, you're going to juvenile hall, you know, and last thing I want to do is go to juvenile hall. So I sobered up and stopped smoking weed, and because I was so frightened of going to juvenile hall. And so I kind of sobered up over that summer. And I remember by the end of the summer, I told my mom, I don't want to go to that school again. I just really felt like what it was, you know, like I was just going nowhere. And so they did a little research, and they found this kind of private school that was ran by ex-hippies in a couple towns over, called North Bay. And it was cool. It was the perfect thing for me, but it cost money. And so my parents didn't trust me. So they said, if you're going to go to this school, you're going to have to pay half the tuition. And that means I always had a job in high school. So you got to work summers, you got to work, you know, part-time while you're going to school, and you got to pay half. And then if I get kicked out, they lose, right? They lose. And so they go, you pay half the tuition, then when you graduate, we give it to you back.
Oh,
give it
wow.
all to you back.
Okay.
So
that's a good incentive.
No, it was great.
Yeah.
I mean, I had to work for it, you know?
Yeah.
So, and I wasn't a great student, never was, but that school did wonders. Like, I had it was, you know, all first name basis. They homework wasn't a thing. They didn't believe in homework. Everything you did, you had to get 85% or better until you moved on. And it kind of changed my deal. I started kind of actually doing my schoolwork and kind of having a little more interest in school.
Good.
And graduated, and I had like a few $1,000s in the bank as an 18-year-old, you know, and I just moved to Hawaii right after. My buddy and I moved to Hawaii right after graduation.
Well, I'm glad they found that school for you, because I was going to ask you, not knowing that you had actually found that fit, but I was going to ask you, or at least just illustrate that in a different environment, you could have been a straight A student and ended up in an Ivy League. You say you're a bad student, but you're clearly intelligent.
Yeah,
and
I don't know about straight A student.
Really?
But I don't know.
I mean, you're clearly intelligent, and you have the discipline and all the other things that come with what's required. School isn't that hard. It's just that you don't want to be there, basically. And if
Yeah.
school knows how to meet the student, you know, there's so many schools nowadays
Oh yeah.
where they know
Totally.
kind of how to meet the student at their level and
Yeah.
not just give them structured, standardized testing
Yeah.
that may or may not apply to them.
Yeah.
So it's almost a shame. I feel like you were rebelling against a larger kind of societal factor, I think.
Yeah.
But it is almost a shame that so many kids of certain generations get painted with such a broad stroke that
Yeah, because no kid's the same, you know, and some kids fit really well into the system, you know, and then there's kids like myself that didn't fit. And
or if you were born 20 years later, you'd be diagnosed with something and
Yeah.
medicated for it.
yeah, I guaranteed I had some kind of learning disability or
Yeah.
something, but I just couldn't sit still. I couldn't, you know, I was always behind. And that's what happens that's pretty much what happened to me, I think, is like you're a little kid, you're not doing as well as your peers, you're
Right.
falling behind, and then what do you just become a troublemaker, because that's what you become, the class clown. You find other ways to make yourself feel better. You get into skating, maybe you do well at skateboarding, and that feels good, and you know, and then you're just on that different road, you know.
Yeah.
And it's different nowadays. I think they can help those kids, you know, but I think you're right. I don't think I would have been a straight A student, gone on to Ivy League schools, but I definitely, towards the end of that time at school, I was more interested in learning. I started getting better grades, but a real saving grace was this teacher, my English teacher. She's my English and literature teacher, and we'd write stories, and she was like, you like writing, like you're good at it, you know. And when I graduated and moved to Hawaii, she sent me a journal to write in, and she sent me constant books. It was so cool. She's this girl, Lisa Burke, this lady, Lisa Burke. And she was really, that was after I graduated. And she was like, you need to write in this journal. You need to read. And she sent me all these classics that I was kind of supposed to read in school, you know, like Steinbeck and The Great Gatsby and all these classics, you know. But then I also stumbled on Charles Bukowski and Herman Hesse and all these great writers. And so suddenly I was reading all these classics, and I just became this real avid reader. I was just reading constantly. And that wasn't me in high school, you know. And it was all because of her. She just kept on feeding these books. And I remember telling her, you know, kind of towards the end of school, I was like, hey, I just read really slow. You know, I'm just a slow reader. And she goes, you know, don't speed up. You'll retain more. You'll enjoy it. There's no reason to read faster. You're going to enjoy it more if you just slow down and stay slow. So I took that, and I became this avid reader, and I wrote in my journal constantly, and I just became this lover of words, you know. You know, I went on, I just started reading all these classics that you're supposed to read, that when you're young, you're like, who the hell is Dostoevsky? Like,
yeah.
sounds horrible. But then you read Dostoevsky and you're like, holy shit. Like, who are these people, you know? So she really kind of changed my life with that, you know?
Did you recognize that was special at the time? That she was isolating you and identifying you as having something unique? Because clearly she wasn't doing that for all her students.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. I never really thought about it.
Because
it is special totally special that she was doing that, you know?
Well, the way I'm thinking of it is, you could have easily felt like a burnout because you were labeled as such.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And then she identified something special in you, which as an adult, I'm around a lot of kids.
Yeah.
And if I saw a kid who I knew had a unique talent that was specific to some skill set that I have or knowledge that I have, I would want to cultivate that in them as well, you know?
Yeah.
I would be like, man, it's rare for a little kid to show a unique talent in that way. How can I help that kid get that out of them? And that's what she did for you.
Maybe she saw something, because I still, even though I did better in school in my last 2 years there,
yeah,
you know, with her as a teacher, I still wasn't embracing education like it was a thing, you know. I didn't go off to college. I did try college eventually, like twice, but I couldn't do it. But I think, maybe she saw something. She must have seen something
Clearly.
in one of my stories or whatever, and go, he's got something there a little bit. But
have you maintained contact with her? Does she know what you ended up doing?
We hung out. Like
No way.
We hung out a few times. I was really after the whole punk rock thing, I got really into like I went backwards. Like and I just read this thing that Henry Rollins just wrote too, and I think a lot of kids had this same kind of path with music, but Henry Rollins was talking about how it's the same thing. Probably I'm like most kids that were into punk rock in those days, is like the music at the time was horrible. It was like glam rock, big stadiums, big guitar solos, disco, it was just really shallow and kind of hero worship and stuff. And what punk rock did is kind of pull it all back and kind of made it rock and roll again, even though it was wacky and crazy. But it's like, that's what rock and roll was. It was like little clubs and people just lost their shit, watching a band play. And that's what punk rock was. So punk rock kind of stepped it back and made it rock and roll again. But everybody just got so immersed that you're like, everything else sucks. I'm just into punk rock. So you go through that, right? And then you start really listening to music. So what punk rock did to me, and this is what Henry Rollins was writing about in his path, is like, then you start being more discerning about your music. Because up to punk rock, I was just spoon-fed stuff. Oh, just whatever's on the radio. And you're just like, you're a passive listener. And then what punk rock did is made you a discerning listener. And then I just backtracked, and I backtracked all the way through the 60s and started listening to all the hippies, all the people we just thought hippies were the lame, punk rockers were just like, you fucking dirty hippies, but now I started kind of going into all the 60s and 70s and all that, listening to that. But then I got into this whole phase of like, I guess they call it prog rock now, or math rock, of real musician music. And I was into this band, King Crimson. And so she said she was tripping out that this kid in her high school was listening to a bunch of King Crimson. And so the first time we hung out after high school, she got a hold of me and she goes, hey, I got free, I can work the aisle at a King Crimson concert. You can work it with me. You want to come? So I hooked up with her and we went and saw King Crimson play and hung out. And we kind of kept in touch a little bit. She's sending me books, but then we'd talk on the phone here and there. She visited me in Hawaii once or twice. And
amazing.
So I haven't seen her in it's probably been 20 years.
Oh, wow.
But she was a huge inspiration in my life. She really, if she didn't do that, I don't think I would have ever gotten into half the things,
Have you listened or heard Henry Rollins' radio show that he did on KCRW?
I've heard of it, but I haven't seen it.
It's good. I don't know if he's still doing it. I listened to it. Last time I heard it was probably 3 or 4 years ago. At that time, he had been doing it for 3 or 4 years.
Yeah. Is it still on?
I don't know. But it was only 1 hour.
Yeah.
And I feel like it was on Saturday nights at like 10, just like the worst slot you could get.
Yeah.
But at that time, they had just started putting it all on the internet as well. So I would just catch it midweek on the internet on my own terms.
It must have been pretty good, right?
It was really good. And it would be like, he might play something that was new, like, oh, this is new Arcade Fire, let's say, or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And then he'd come out of that and be like, so anyways, we were playing in a club in Detroit in 1987. And, we just got off the stage at 2 a.m. and I went to the bathroom and I was coming out of the bathroom and some guy walked up to me and he handed me a mixtape or like his demo tape or whatever it was. Anyways, this is song number 3 on the B side of that. Click. And he puts it. And you're like, what?
Wow, yeah,
you're expecting him to say they went on to become
yeah.
whatever or whoever. And it's like, nope, this is just a random demo tape that somebody handed him.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah,
that's so cool.
It was really an interesting show in that way.
He's way more, I really admire him because he's way more interesting now than he was when he was in Black Flag. Because like when I think so that album came out, his first album with Black Flag, Damaged, I think it came out in 81. I think that's about right. And so I think that's when I probably heard it, is around that time. And of course, you're so psyched. But the more I looked into him, he's kind of this militant jock character. He's not as cool as I thought. And then he got into his long hair and dancing on stage in his fishnets and short. Like it was just this kind of almost rock and roll thing. But he's gotten more interesting as he's gotten older. Like he doesn't really want to just be. He's not stuck in the past, because a lot of people from that era are stuck in the past. They still just listen to punk rock and that's it. And his whole thing was just, moving forward, like punk rock. And that's how I feel about punk rock. It was just it came around at a perfect time to pull everything back. And it was a way of moving forward. It wasn't a nostalgic thing. It was like, and that's how I see it. And I think that's how he's done it. He's like evolved and he's become a different person. He's not Henry Rollins of Black Flag anymore. He travels. He's got a whole different world out there. But there's a lot of guys from his era that are just like, they're stuck, you know?
Yeah.
And I saw him he does these like not open mics, but these kind of spoken word things right here in Santa Barbara. And we went down and watched him, and it was insane. He's such a great speaker, and he just held you're just gripped on the edge of your seat for like an hour and a half. And he does it like he's holding the mic it's like he's on stage singing, you know, it's like,
yeah, he's
still that guy. He's intense, but he's really good.
Literally last week I rewatched Heat, the Michael Mann film.
Oh, I don't know if I've seen that.
Okay, it's a huge action film from like 20 years ago.
Oh, yeah. Okay,
with like Robert De Niro, Al
yeah.
Pacino, Val Kilmer.
Yeah.
Henry Rollins is in it.
Is he?
He's in it. And
he's got all these bit parts. Like,
he does.
Yeah, so
and
funny.
I had seen the movie 10 years ago probably, and when he came on screen, I was like, oh, I forgot he's in this. I forgot that he even acts, you know?
Yeah, he's
cool. He's an interesting dude.
He really is. He's I have a bunch of his books and stuff. Like he's great.
So landed in Hawaii when you're 18 years old. What year was that? And what was, you had a little bit of money, but what was your plan to work and live and all that sort of stuff?
Yeah. So my buddy and I, who I grew up skating with, Matt Charlo, he and I when we were 16, we were on a family trip with my family in Kauai.
Oh, okay.
And that's the second time I've ever been there. And my first time in Kauai, I just freaked out because all I knew was Lake Tahoe and Santa Cruz. I just didn't know warm water existed. And that's when I really fell in love with Hawaii, was when I was a little kid, like 10 years old. But then on another trip when I was 16 with Matt, we one night on the beach, we shook hands and we just made a plan that we're going to move here after high school. And of course we went back, you know, we still had 2 more years of high school left, and everybody, our parents, our friends are like, yeah, right. Sure. Everybody says that. They come back from Hawaii, we're going to move there. And we said, no, that's what we're going to do. So we worked every summer, we saved our money. And right when we graduated, it was 87.
Okay.
We were both 18. We moved to Diamond Head. Right next to, we wanted to move to Kauai, but you know, it's your first time away from home. We don't know about jobs. You know, what are we going to do on Kauai? You know, we just thought, you know, Honolulu, Waikiki would be our best bet to find a job. And so we lived right next to Diamond Head, and right between kind of Waikiki and Diamond Head, right there in Montserrat. And we had a little apartment, and my job was, I was a landscape maintenance guy it was a Kahala Hilton at that time, right around the corner. And I did that. I think I started at like 5 a.m, was off at 2 so I could surf. And I was doing trips out to the North Shore and surfing the South Shore. And we were skating a lot too. We're skating, I don't know if you've heard of Wallows. It's kind of like this legendary place, but we were skating Wallows. We were skating but some of the backyard pools around there. But that's when I got more into surfing, because I couldn't really surf until I was driving. So I started kind of late, you know, in Danville. So I was surfing, but you know, back before reports, you know, half the time I'd go to the ocean, it was just horrible, you know, but, so I surfed some in my high school years, but that's when I really started surfing more and going to the North Shore. And then, I was there for a while, and then moved back to Danville I think I was back for a year or something. I actually went to Santa Barbara. I went to junior college right here for 2 semesters, and hardly did college or anything. And then moved back to the North Shore. So I think I went to Hawaii in 87, lived on the South Shore, came back, and then went to the North Shore in 90.
Okay.
So that's when I landed on the North Shore, and then stayed there for about 15 years after that.
When did you meet the Malloy brothers? Was that there?
Yeah, it was like mid-90s, like 95.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know you became a lifeguard at some point and a flight attendant.
Yeah.
Which happened first?
The flight attendant thing.
Okay.
So I was living for a couple of years. Do you know the North Shore that well?
Yeah.
Like, you know Chun's Reef?
Yep.
There's the only house on the Mauka side there. It's still there. It's the only house there. Few of my friends from Danville, we all moved there, which was hilarious because like we didn't know what was going on. It's just like I think the difference is if you grow up in like Santa Cruz or a beach town, it's like your uncle's been in the North Shore, or you got a hookup or whatever. We're just a bunch of kooks from Danville, and we just moved into this house, and it was hilarious. It's just like just a frat house almost. Like it was just such a dump, and Roy Russell at that time lived right behind us in this little like the little farmhouse and stuff. And so we would go sit back with Rory and learn all these stories from him. And so that was our introduction down there, and it's perfect because you got Jocko's there and Chun's Reef. Chun's Reef is pretty mellow wave. And so I was living there, and then I moved up to Waimea Bay or something. Yeah, I was there for a little bit. And then I met Chris Malloy I think the first time we met was it was a mutual friend of ours. That's right. I'd tried climbing once before I moved, and I brought the shoes with me. And that girl saw those shoes in my house, and she goes, "Oh, I have a friend that's got shoes like that." This is the weirdest thing. I totally forgot about this. So I had some climbing shoes that I didn't really use that were just sitting there, and she goes, "Oh, I have a friend that's got shoes like that. I don't know what those are." And I'm like, "Oh, they're climbing shoes." So we're at a party. She's like, "Hey, this is my friend that's got those climbing shoes." And it was Chris Malloy. And of course I knew about him at that point. And I was like, "Oh, hey, what's up?"
Okay.
And so we just started chit-chatting. And he was kind of an armchair climber like me. He knew about it. He was into it. He kind of tried it once or twice, but didn't take. And so we kind of nerded out. Like we knew about climbing. And so we talked about climbing, which is so funny. So Chris and I would see each other at parties and stuff. And our kind of connection was like, we just talk about climbing, which is so funny. And so we weren't like friends, but when we saw each other, we'd always like rap about stuff. But it's interesting. It was climbing that.
Because there's no climbing community on the North Shore, right?
No, when I moved there in the early 90s, there was some people bouldering at Waimea Bay. And I remember going down there one time and kind of talking to them, and I kind of bouldered, but I was so focused on surfing. I'm living in Hawaii on the North Shore. I'm like, I'm not going to climb, So I just kind of lost interest. So there is I'll get back to that. I did started climbing there eventually, but yeah, there was some people climbing, but it wasn't really much of a thing. So I didn't really get into it. But Chris and I, it was funny that we just had this connection about climbing for some reason. And I forget how it went after that. I heard of this house that popped up at Rocky Point, and those things, you just got to jump on them, and I remember our mutual friend, the same girl, she goes, "Hey, I think the Malloys are looking for a place too." And then, do you know Noah Johnson? Mm-hmm. Noah was looking for a place. So me, Chris, and Noah moved into this house at Rocky Point, I think in 95. And so it was me, Chris, and Noah, and then Keith and Dan would just kind of crash here and there. And at that time, I became a flight attendant in 92, I'm sorry. I wanted to be a fireman. That was my whole thing, and I took the test and everything. But then while I was doing that, I had a roommate that was a flight attendant. He goes, "Why don't you just become a flight attendant? It's fireman hours. You work like 5 to 10 days a month, and you travel the world." So I went to one of those cattle call hirings and got hired and became a flight attendant. It's the strangest thing.
Amazing.
But I did that for a long time, and then I started lifeguarding too. So you have a ton of days off as a flight attendant, so I could lifeguard on my days off. So I started that in 93. So I was doing both for quite a long time. And the lifeguard thing started on the west side, and then I moved to the North Shore.
I've heard of you talking about wanting, or one of the appeals of the flight attendant gig was being able to travel.
Yeah.
What was your interest in traveling?
It's, surf, obviously,
Had your parents instilled that in you at all, or
we didn't do a ton of international traveling when I was a kid. I don't even know when the first time I left the country was, but just basic like little road. We did a lot of road trips. There's, come to think of it, mostly just California traveling around, like a lot of different road trips.
It's such a part of your identity now. Like, it seemed like a real passion.
Yeah, and I think it starts from just I mean, I can go back to the skateboarding thing. Just you want to see what's around the corner, and as being 13 years old, and just going into the unknown in San Francisco at age 13 was so exciting. I think that just kind of stuck with me. You just want to see stuff.
Yeah.
And then surfing to me, to everybody else, I think is just such a great excuse to see places. I remember my mom I'd come back from these surf trips and she goes, "Oh, did you see this or did you see that?" And I'm like, "No." "Well, why the hell did you go?" Right. And I go, "Well, no, I hung out with this family and drank in the local bar for like a month." To me, that's more fulfilling than going to see the sights, and surfing is such a great excuse to do that. You're going places that you normally wouldn't go unless you were surfing. So the flight attendant gig was such a great job to have. I wasn't making a ton of money, but it was enough to survive. I had a van stashed in a garage in San Francisco. I had boards stashed in Tahiti. I had, it was incredible. I could go to the airport. I'd take my board bag to FedEx. I'd FedEx my surfboards for $25 wherever I wanted to go.
Crazy.
And I just have to wait a day or two when I got there. I'd go jump into first class with a backpack and just fly around. I mean, it was insane.
Wow.
The lifestyle was just ridiculous. I remember sometimes, we'd surf all day and it'd be Friday and we'd be drinking beers and I'd be like, I'm going to go to San Francisco, and I'd just go get a flight and I'd be partying in San Francisco that night, like last call at a bar, and then come back Sunday or something, It
What
was just
life, man.
it was a ridiculous life, I think the travel was mainly surf, I just wanted to, how it is. You're just so psyched on surfing. It wasn't like I was motivated culturally, but obviously that happens. You're in Indonesia and all these different places, and
I have 2 lines of questioning. I'll throw them both out. You can run with whatever grabs you first. When did you start documenting this stuff with photos and story? And then secondly, were there any girls along the way that you wanted to hunker down with that would have thwarted that lifestyle, Because that's a common storyline as well for a lot of people is
the travel
they
thing,
hunker down,
Yeah, and the travel stops, you mean?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, a partner is the one who ultimately stops that exploration lifestyle for people.
Yeah.
And how did you avoid it, if so?
How do you avoid it? That's so funny. How do you avoid that? So the way, so I because of my teacher, Lisa Burke, she was sending me journals. I kept a journal, so I would write in that journal. And during my travels, I started journaling all the time.
Got it. It was just documenting the experience, or was it story form, or when did?
I think it was like started with just like a journal entry of thoughts, you know, and I don't think I was like, I haven't looked through my journals in years. I don't know. Like I think I was exercising a lot too. I would be sitting someplace and I would like just write a scene. I remember first time I went to mainland Mexico, Pascuales, this, early 90s, and I think those journals got lost in like a flood, but I would see a scene go down, just a mundane scene in an airport or on a street corner, and I would just write about that scene. And then there's stuff like, day to day, here I am today. I think there's just like the documenting, like here I am today. But I was I think it was because I was reading so much. I was seeing how I could craft little stories. I'll have to look at my journals to see when I started doing that. But I knew that's what I was doing for a while. And, I had one of these Minolta water cameras. Have you ever seen those yellow cameras? Yeah. And because it was waterproof, I just brought that everywhere. So I was always, as you do, you're taking pictures of your tent or, your kids in the square or whatever. And so I was taking pictures and writing little things. But the way the writing started is, do you know the Johnson? Do you know P.D. Johnson? And
I know of them. I've not spent time with them.
The three brothers, Jack Johnson, P.D. Johnson, Trent Johnson. P.D. and I became really good friends early on through lifeguarding. And he was at that time he was like a staff writer for Surfer, I think.
Okay.
And this is probably 98, 99. And I hadn't got a camera yet, but I'd been writing my journals, I hadn't got a real camera yet. But PD was going to go interview this guy, Walter Eric Haas. Eric Haas is what we called him then, but then I think he started going by Walter, brother Walter. But anyways, one of my favorite surfers of all time. And Petey goes, hey, I'm going to go interview him for this little thing. Do you want to go? And I go, hell yeah. This guy's such a character and he's so phenomenally talented. So we go interview him. Petey takes like a picture and we interview him. And after the interview, I told Petey, I go, it was going to go into this thing called the Surfer Guide or something, which is like an offset kind of magazine. And I go, man, he deserves so much more than just the surf guide. This guy is one of the best, most talented surfers in the world, I think, you know, and he's such a character. And I don't know if Petey at the time was being defensive or passive aggressive, or he was just being nice, but he goes, well, why don't you write it? I go, seriously? And he goes, yeah, why don't you take a crack at it? So I wrote this whole thing about him, I interviewed Al Chapman about him. I interviewed a few people around, just getting pull quotes. I interviewed Brian Kealana because Brian Kealana was my captain when I first started lifeguarding. So I interviewed Brian. Brian said some great things about him. And then I had to have my friend's wife type it out for me. I didn't know how to type, so she typed it out. And then I heard of these photos of him in Kauai, and I went over to Kauai and found these couple photos that I had scanned of him at Honolulu Bay, like huge Honolulu Bay. And I'm on like this giant, like 10-6, no leash, and that's what he just ride these big guns and just surf these crazy waves. But anyways, found these little prints. And then I think Chris helped me out. I was living with Chris at the time, and I think he might have told Pesman or something, Surfers Journal, I was going to drop by. I forget this sequence there, but I always had this thing about if you want to do something, you just show up. My dad always told me that. And he's just like, just show up and just, I'm ready. Like, don't mess around. So I flew to where's Surfers Journal again? It's in
San Clemente.
Yeah, I flew to LA, drove to San Clemente, had a meeting with them, and I just went in and I just showed up with like all these photos and like this printed out thing, and I just handed it to Scott Hewlett. So I sat down with Pesman and Scott Hewlett, and to me that was enough. Like I just met Pesman and Scott Hewlett. That was awesome. And I think this is the beginning of cell phones, but I was driving away, and Hewlett calls me and he's like, hey, we're going to run with that story. And it was a mind blower for me because I'm a super fan of Surfers Journal. It's the only thing I collect. I have the entire collection of Surfers Journal. I've read them all cover to cover. And to have your stuff in there, it's just, for me, it's just, so I was just on cloud nine. I couldn't believe it that they were going to publish that. And so that kind of started my thing. You know, I didn't think of it as a job, but I said, maybe I could kind of do this. I love doing this, and maybe I can do more of this, you know? And eventually got a camera to kind of fulfill that side of storytelling. And that's really what spurred the whole thing of just trying to document things. And, you know, it turned into something, but yeah, that was kind of my first little, that's the first thing I ever got published was that. And then since then I've done a ton of, I think I've done like 7 different feature articles for Surfers Journal or something. Like I had a run for a while at that time.
Yeah. I don't know that there, at that point, there was even a career path for writing individual articles for Surfers Journal or magazines.
Yeah.
If you can make enough money to make that a full career. But did you at least have confidence enough in your writing to where you felt like you could make a living writing, whether it would be books or anything like that?
You know, it is funny because, you know, you add up the money. I remember getting paid and who cares, right? It was enough just to have it in Surfers Journal. But I was like, okay, how could you make a living? I'd have to do 7 of those a month, and that took me like 3 months to do. You know, like that took me so long.
Exactly.
And so I didn't even think of it as any kind of job. I knew I was creative, and I knew that I loved doing that, and I just wanted to do more of that. And I didn't know where it was going to go at all, you know?
Yeah. Because the path that you ultimately end up in wasn't even a job really at that time. You couldn't have even designed the path because it kind of met you, right?
Yeah. It just kind of, yeah. It's a weird thing.
It's a good inspirational story for people listening to just follow whatever your passion is.
Yeah.
and you can make a career out of it potentially.
And not always. I mean, it
Not
could,
always,
there's
but-
certain steps along the way that if they didn't happen, maybe it wouldn't have happened. You
Yeah.
know, I pinch myself all the time. I was just on a job in Scotland for Yeti recently, and I was just like, man, I just love what I do. And I don't even know how I got here. Like, I'm so lucky, you know?
Yeah.
And I think part of it is too, is like, there's luck, there's timing, you got to have a passion for it. I think that drives everything. It's just, you just love this thing. And, you know, but it could go either way. You just don't know. And, you know,
Well, the good news is you were willing to do it for free, and you were also willing to continue lifeguarding and being a flight attendant in perpetuity in order to do those things for free.
Yeah, I wasn't looking for anything more.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm stoked on,
not
on what
like-
I'm doing.
Yeah, it's
This
not
would
like you
be-
have a wife or a mortgage and kids to feed, and you're
Oh,
like,
yeah.
I'm quitting my job to pursue photography.
Yeah. I just like quit everything, and then all of a sudden I'm like, wait, what?
Yeah, exactly.
That's and then the travel thing. It was funny. My wife and I moved to Hawaii just recently. We moved back there with our daughter at the time, and right before COVID. So we were there for 2 years, and it's so great to visit North Shore 20 years later after I moved with my daughter and kind of see it through her eyes. So cool. But I remember when COVID hit and we were all just staying home, and I was thinking about it, and I told my wife, I go, wow, I don't think I've stopped traveling in 30 years.
Yeah.
You know, like since 92 when I became a flight attendant. I think there was a time we went on strike where I might have not gone anywhere for like in maybe 93. But since then I've been on the road.
Amazing.
You know, and you're right. There's what did you ask? Like how you didn't meet the right person to take you off the road, or what?
Yeah. Or were there any girls along the way that potentially could have taken you off the road essentially?
Yeah. And I don't know how, you know, I had girlfriends and I look back and I don't know if I was willing. I don't know if I was like, I know I wasn't willing to budge from what I was doing.
Good.
So maybe that's it.
The answer is no then.
Yeah. I was just kind of on this thing, and, you know, I to tell you the truth, I never really thought I was going to get married. Like I thought I was going to be the single guy and not going to have kids and not bummed at all. Like that's kind of how I saw my path. Yeah, I'm probably just not going to get married, you know, and didn't think I would ever have a job that could afford that, you know?
Sure.
And so I didn't really even think about it, you know?
Yeah.
Like, it happened late in life, just kind of happened, and it was kind of out of, you know, left field.
Yeah.
But
Well, good. You got to experience the best of both worlds then.
yeah,
Because I think when I look at people in their 20s and they do create anchors that prevent them from exploring the world.
yeah,
And so take that time to really explore.
yeah.
And so it's great to see that you had that kind of foresight
Yeah.
to just commit to it and do it.
Well, and on the flip side too, there's some people I met that did meet that person, and I think it's beautiful. Like they met the person.
It's great
and,
when it works.
and it works for some people, and I admire that. I'm like, man, you found that person and you're with them. And I think everybody, if they found that person, maybe would take that route. It's awesome, you know. But I didn't find that person, or maybe I wasn't open to it.
Right.
But some kids asking advice these days, you know, my whole thing is just like, go be bored. Don't be in a rush. Like, take your time. Like, life is so short.
I know.
You don't really have a lot of time, especially when you get older, to hang out. So like, have nothing to do, you know, just sit around. Being bored is so good for you. You know, read a book, sit around. You wake up, you have nothing to do nothing. Just sit around.
Don't fill your day.
Like, don't be a loser, but like, yeah, just don't fill your days with stuff and be in a hurry to be this or that. And I know it's the antithesis of what maybe some parents try and teach their kids. Like, you gotta, you know, get on the ball. You know, you never know. You gotta, you know, go to college and get a job. And, you know, like, especially now, like, screw that. Like, you can reinvent yourself at any time, especially with how tech is going. And again, my thing is, you know, it's different. I got lucky, and maybe I'm an anomaly because of that. But that's my biggest thing with kids is like, man, just hang out, like, just enjoy it. Don't be in a rush, you know?
it's great advice that I've never heard anybody give before.
Of that.
But it's great advice.
Well, maybe I read too much Bukowski, because Bukowski's all about that. He's like, man, just don't do shit. But of course he was a prolific writer, but
I mean, it's,
he was an advocate of sitting around. Like he would just drink beer and sit around, but he was a writer, you know, he just wrote. But yeah, it's, life's so short. And you it's all this stuff that you see in hindsight when you get older, you know, like, oh my God, I had so much time when I was younger. And that's the thing, that's the whole paradox of being young. You don't know. You have no idea.
Or you see so many people fill their day and their life with busyness that ultimately doesn't generate anything meaningful at all.
Yeah.
And so you almost need that breathing space in order to think of what to create and how to create it and to do something meaningful. Because if you're just busy all the time, you don't even have...
Well, that's and that's the hard part as you get older. If you're in like a creative occupation, is your creative time is shortened, because with, you know, I have 2 kids now and a demanding job, and you know, it's like when is that time when I'm just sitting there doing nothing? It's kind of never,
right?
You know, so like a long drive, you know, I go climbing in Yosemite and stuff. Maybe long drives. When I go running, that helps. You know, surfing can help if it's not that crowded out there and I'm too busy jockeying for surf. But yeah, you need that time of just like idleness where you're not preoccupied with anything, you know. And it's hard with the devices, you know, like the phone and stuff. So it's an important thing to just sit there.
It is. Let's take a bathroom break.
Yeah, I gotta blow my nose.
All right, cool.